I never thought my marriage would end up needing documentation, not counseling, not a vacation, not one of those desperate, let's reconnect by cooking together. No. My wife handed me a printed contract, an actual, stapled, neatly formatted, deliberately titled contract. "We need a reset," she said. That sentence alone already irritated me. It was a Thursday night, around 8. The kitchen light was on, the dining table was cleared, and there was a blue folder sitting in the center like evidence. Claire and I had been together 6 years, married for 4. Over the last year, but especially the last few months, she'd changed. Not all at once. Claire changed gradually, professionally, like she was rolling out a software update nobody asked for. She got colder. There were fewer hugs that weren't initiated by me. Fewer small touches in the kitchen. Fewer random smiles. The kind of intimacy that makes marriage feel like marriage started thinning out like my patience in traffic. At the same time, the criticism increased. Not explosive criticism. That would have been almost refreshing. At least then I could argue back. "You're very reactive lately. You always make things heavier than they need to be. I just need you to become easier to talk to." That last one was rich, considering most conversations with her now felt like job performance reviews conducted by a woman who already regretted hiring me. I wasn't perfect. Far from it. I can be blunt. I can get irritated fast. I do not possess the serene spirit of a monk or the patient smile of a therapist. If something feels insulting, I usually notice immediately and, unlike some men, I do not have a lifelong hobby of pretending I don't. But I wasn't some useless slob either. I worked, I paid bills, I cleaned, I cooked more than she did. I handled repairs because apparently I was the only one in the home who understood that things do not fix themselves through feminine energy and online shopping. Still, something had shifted in the balance between us, and I felt it even before I could explain it. So there I was, and seeing that folder in the middle of the table. "What's this?" I asked. Claire gave me a small, controlled smile. "Something I put together for us." I set the food down. "Why does that sound like bad news?" "It isn't bad news," she said. "It's structure. People love that word when they're about to do something deeply annoying." I sat down slowly and opened the folder. The title was centered at the top, in bold. Relationship Reset Agreement. For a second, I actually thought maybe this was a prank. Not a good one, obviously. Claire wasn't funny in that way. Her humor was mostly forwarding memes 3 days late and saying, "This is so us," under posts about couples who clearly hated each other. But still, I looked up. "You're serious?" "Yes." She exhaled through her nose the way she did whenever I said something she considered immature, which at this point included breathing in a tone she didn't approve of. "I need you not to mock this," she said. "I spent a lot of time on it." I looked back down. It was several pages long. It had sections, bullet points, subpoints, and phrasing that sounded like if HR and a passive-aggressive podcast host had a baby. "Claire," I said slowly, "why does this look less like a marriage and more like the husband's contract?" "Because spoken conversations with you go nowhere." I looked up. "Wow, great start." "I'm being honest." She folded her arms. "Read it first." So I did. Page 1 started with a short introduction about how relationships require intentional effort, emotional safety, and clearly defined expectations. It used the phrase, mutually beneficial dynamic, which is not something anyone in love should ever say unless they're also discussing trade routes. Then came the sections. Communication guidelines, emotional boundaries, household participation standards, conflict de-escalation rules, intimacy framework. I started reading aloud. Both parties agree to prioritize non-confrontational communication and avoid emotionally loaded questioning. I looked at her. "Emotionally loaded questioning?" "Yes," she said. "Like when you ask things in an accusatory tone." "What's an example?" She shrugged. "Why are you being weird?" would be one. That's not emotionally loaded, that's efficient. She ignored that. I kept reading. Husband agrees to communicate his plans in advance when possible, including expected return times, social plans, and deviations from routine. I stared at that line for a moment. She gave me that look again, the one that said I was proving her point just by existing. I read the next clause. Husband agrees to reduce defensiveness when receiving feedback. I let out a laugh. Amazing sentence, really elegant, also impossible. It means hear me out before reacting. It means if you insult me, I'm supposed to nod like everything you say is brilliant. See? This is exactly the problem. No, Claire, the problem is that you made a pamphlet. That landed. I could tell because her jaw tightened for half a second. Good. I went on. There was a section about household responsibilities that basically turned me into a salaried domestic assistant with no retirement plan. Trash, dishes, laundry rotation, cleaning schedule, grocery backup responsibility, maintenance oversight. Now, to be fair, I already did a lot of those things. The insulting part wasn't the tasks. The insulting part was seeing them framed like she was generously allowing me to contribute to the civilization she had built. Then I hit the part that made me put the papers down and just stare at the wall for a second. Either party may request a silence interval of up to 48 hours following emotional strain. During this period, the other party agrees not to force discussion, seek clarification, or engage in repeated bids for reassurance. I looked at her slowly. What the hell is a silence interval? It means if I'm emotionally overloaded, I don't want to be chased into a conversation. 48 hours? Yes. So you get to freeze me out for 2 days and I'm supposed to just respectfully haunt the apartment? You make everything sound ridiculous. No, I reveal the ridiculousness that is already there. That's a gift. She sighed. Why are you determined to make this harder? Because my wife just handed me a ceasefire treaty for a war I didn't realize had legal counsel. I read on. There was a clause about tone escalation, one about domestic consistency, one about restorative distance after conflict, and then I reached the intimacy section. I'd like to say I misread something, but no, it was right there. Husband must not initiate intimacy for 30 days unless expressly invited. I read it again. Then a third time, because maybe if I stared hard enough, the sentence would burst into flames out of shame. Instead, it stayed there. Calm, confident, unbothered, just like her. I looked up. You cannot be serious. She held my gaze. I am. You printed a sentence telling your husband not to touch you unless summoned. It's not about that. Oh, I'm sure it has a beautiful corporate explanation. It's about removing pressure and rebuilding trust. I laughed once. Sharp. Humorless. Pressure? Claire, do you hear yourself? Yes, more clearly than you hear me, apparently. Rebuilding trust? Who cheated? Did I miss an episode? She crossed her arms tighter. This is exactly why we struggle. You immediately become combative. Because my wife put me on intimacy probation. For a second I thought marriage had become a subscription service. She did not appreciate that. To be fair, I appreciated it enough for both of us. I tapped the page with one finger. So, let me understand this. You can decide when we talk. You can decide when we stop talking. You can request silence intervals, like you're a software system entering safe mode. I get a task list. I get tone supervision. And now there's a clause saying I'm banned from initiating anything physical for 30 days unless invited. Yes. I leaned back and looked at the ceiling. Outstanding. Really. You somehow took marriage and turned it into a behavioral rehab program. She sat down across from me then, very composed, very deliberate, like she was about to explain to a difficult child why bedtime was not oppression. I'm trying to make this relationship healthier. No, I said. You're trying to make it easier for you. That is not true. Then why does every rule here regulate me and protect you? Her face changed just slightly. I flipped back through the pages. "Show me your restrictions," I said. "What?" "Your side. What are your rules? Where's the section that says wife agrees to stop speaking to her husband like he's the intern who ruined quarterly numbers? Where's the section that says wife will show affection without acting like she's granting a rare state permit? Where's the part where wife agrees not to weaponize distance every time she feels mildly inconvenienced?" She looked away for a moment, then back at me. "I knew you'd react like this." I smiled without warmth. "Then why print it single-sided? Waste of paper?" That got me a glare. Small victory. "I'm not trying to control you," she said. I held up the papers. "Then this is the most controlling, non-controlling document in modern history. This is about boundaries. Boundaries are, I don't like being spoken to that way. This," I lifted the packet again, "is a marriage constitution written by a woman who recently discovered the word framework and got drunk on authority." Her lips pressed into a line. That line always meant danger. Normally, at that point in a conversation, there would be one of two outcomes. Either she'd pull back and go cold, which was her specialty, or I'd push too hard, and we'd end up in a full argument where somehow I'd be blamed for the fact that she had started with something insane and I had failed to react like a calm yoga instructor. But that night she stayed measured, and that's what really unsettled me. She wasn't improvising. She'd rehearsed this. "I need to know whether you're willing to work with me," she said. I set the papers down and looked at her for a long second. "Let's skip the fake language," I said. "What happens if I don't sign it?" She folded her hands together. "Then I think that tells me a lot." She leaned forward. "I am asking for effort." "No, you're asking for compliance. I honestly don't know how to communicate with you anymore." That line annoyed me for a very specific reason. People say it when they are, in fact, communicating quite clearly. What they mean is, I don't know how to communicate with you in a way that gives me exactly what I want without resistance. I smiled. Ah, yes, St. Clair of structural reform. She stood up from the table, took a sip of water, and turned back to me. "You can joke all you want, but things have not been working." That part, unfortunately, was true, which made everything more dangerous. If we'd been perfect, I could have laughed in her face and tossed the packet in the trash. But we hadn't been perfect. We'd been frayed, distant, irritated, off balance. That's why this landed at all. Because underneath the insult, there was just enough truth to make refusal complicated. I hated that. I hated that she knew it too. "You really think this is going to help us?" I asked. "Yes. And you don't see how insulting it is?" "I think your pride is making it insulting." I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my jaw. Part of me wanted to stand up, tell her to take her agreement and file it under delusion, and walk out for the night. Part of me wanted to rip the pages in half right there and enjoy the sound. But I didn't, because I could already see the story that would come next. If I refused, I'd become the problem. The husband unwilling to grow, the husband threatened by boundaries, the husband who mocked a serious effort to save the marriage, and maybe even worse than that, I'd learned nothing. At that point, I still didn't know exactly what game she was playing. I only knew the board had changed without my permission. "What if I sign it and this changes nothing?" I asked. "It will change things if you actually respect it." I looked down at the pages one more time. I looked up. "You already decided I'm signing this, didn't you?" She didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. I exhaled slowly, picked up the pen lying next to the folder, and signed it. Just my name, hard enough to nearly tear the paper. Claire let out a soft breath, and for the first time that evening, she smiled. I hated that smile instantly. Not because it was cruel on the surface. It wasn't. It was worse. It was satisfied. "Thank you," she said. "You'll see. This is going to reduce a lot of tension." She straightened the pages, neatly, smoothed the edge with her fingertips, and set them back into the folder with the kind of care people usually reserve for important records. That's when the first real thought hit me. Cold and clean. This didn't feel like two people trying to fix a marriage. It felt like one person installing a system, and I had just signed myself into it. It was the beginning of the show. The next morning, the contract already had a new name in my head. Not relationship reset agreement. No. This thing deserved honesty. The husband's contract. I didn't say it out loud, but that's what it was. A manual on how to become a quieter, more manageable version of myself. Claire woke up before me, which wasn't unusual. But what was unusual was how efficient she looked. Calm. Focused. Like she'd slept well after installing new software. I lay there pretending to still be half asleep while she moved around the bedroom. She checked her phone first thing. Quick glance. Small smile. Then she got up and headed to the bathroom. That smile again. I stared at the ceiling. Great. Day one of being a well-regulated husband. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already making coffee. 2 mugs. That was new. Usually she made one and I made my own. I almost laughed. Oh, wow, I said. Day 1 benefits package? She didn't like that. Can you not start like this? I'm not starting anything. I'm just appreciating the structured kindness. She handed me the mug. I thought we'd try being more positive. Excellent. Should I fill out a positivity form? She sighed. You're going to sabotage this, aren't you? No, I said calmly. I signed it. I'm committed. Fully compliant. Version 1.0. She watched me carefully, like she was trying to detect sarcasm levels in the air. I just want us to be calmer, she said. We're calm, I replied. I've never been calmer. I'm practically a meditation app. She shook her head and sat down. Breakfast was quiet, not tense, just structured. And that was the weird part. We weren't talking naturally. Every sentence felt measured, like we were both aware there were invisible rules hovering above the table. Halfway through eating, she said, "Do you know what time you'll be home tonight?" There it was. Clause 1. I swallowed. Around 6:30, maybe 7 if traffic is bad. She nodded. Okay. No follow-up, no warmth, just data logged. I almost expected her to write it down. Before leaving, she added, "Also, I might meet Sarah later." Noted, I said. She frowned. You don't have to say it like that. I'm just acknowledging the update. She grabbed her bag. You're being passive-aggressive. No, I said. I'm being structured. That ended the conversation. At work, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because I was heartbroken, not because I felt destroyed, because I felt irritated. Deeply, steadily irritated. Not the explosive kind. The kind that sits quietly and sharpens itself. Around noon, she texted me. Hope your day is going well. That was new. I replied, It is. Following the communication guidelines. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you don't have to keep referencing it. I don't, I wrote back, but it's helpful. No reply after that. When I got home at 6:42 p.m., yes, I checked. She wasn't there. That didn't bother me. What bothered me was that I noticed the kitchen table was cleared except for one thing. The folder. The husband's contract. She'd left it there. Not hidden, not put away, just present. Like a reminder, like a new piece of furniture. I stood there for a moment staring at it, then laughed quietly. Welcome home, I muttered. Your authority has been installed. I opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sat down. She came home around 9. She walked in cheerful, not overly, but lighter than usual. Hey, she said. Hey, I replied. How was your evening? Peaceful, no violations. She rolled her eyes and kicked off her shoes. Can you stop? I literally signed a behavioral document. You can't expect me not to reference it. She set her bag down and checked her phone again. Quick glance. Another small smile. Then she locked it. Dinner? She asked. I already ate. She nodded. Okay. Then she said, "Thanks for not texting me repeatedly." I looked at her. I wasn't aware that was a risk. You usually ask where I am. Ah, so that was one of the perks. Less questions, less oversight, more freedom. Interesting. You requested reduced emotionally loaded questioning, I said. I'm respecting that. I'm following instructions. She didn't answer. That night we sat on the couch. She scrolled. I watched TV. No touching, no leaning, no casual closeness. And the weirdest part? She seemed comfortable. Too comfortable. Like the distance wasn't something she was tolerating. It was something she preferred. At one point she laughed at something on her phone. A real laugh. Not the polite kind. I looked over. What's funny? She tilted the screen away instinctively before answering. Just Sarah. Of course. I nodded. Good. Later, when we went to bed, she turned away almost immediately. No good night kiss, no casual contact. I lay there again, staring into the dark. Day 1. And already something felt off. Not because she was cold. She'd been cold before. But now she was relaxed. Like the pressure in the room had dropped. Like she'd removed something uncomfortable. And that's when the thought came, sharper than before. This contract didn't just regulate me. It freed her. And I started wondering what exactly she needed that freedom for. The next 2 evenings followed the same pattern. Once, sure. Twice, maybe. 3 times starts to look less like a social life and more like a script. I got home. Claire wasn't there. A couple hours later, she came back lighter than usual, phone in hand, smile she tried to hide, same explanation every time. Sarah again, she said. Of course. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just noticing the pattern. There is no pattern. 3 nights in a row is at least auditioning for one. She didn't like that. Good, because I didn't like what I was seeing either. Before the contract, if she came home late, there was always some tension in the air, some readiness to explain, some awareness that being vague looked bad. Now there was none of that. That was the part that bothered me. The husband's contract hadn't just stopped me from asking questions. It had removed any expectation that she answer them. And Claire seemed very comfortable with that. One night I woke up and saw the glow of her phone under the blanket. She turned it off the second I moved. Small detail. But small details are how lies warm up before they start running. By then, I wasn't angry yet. Just alert. Because the contract wasn't making us healthier. It was making me quieter. And it was making her freer. A few more days passed, and I stopped counting the evenings. Not because nothing was happening, because everything had become smooth. Too smooth. Claire didn't argue anymore. She didn't roll her eyes as often. She didn't seem irritated by me. The apartment felt quieter, calmer, more functional, exactly like she had promised. But something underneath that calm didn't feel healthy. It felt hollow. We talked less, but she didn't try to fill the gaps. She spent more time on her phone, but not in the bored scrolling way. Focused, engaged, occasionally smiling, occasionally typing fast, always locking it the moment I shifted in her direction, and I stayed quiet. The husband's contract was working, at least on paper. One evening I got home earlier than usual. The apartment was empty. I dropped my keys, loosened my jacket, and headed toward the bedroom when I heard her voice. She was in the living room, on the phone. I stopped automatically, not trying to eavesdrop, just surprised she was already home. But then I heard my name. No, he actually signed it. Her tone was light, almost amused. I froze. He didn't even argue that much. I mean, a little sarcasm, but that's normal. Pause. Then she laughed quietly. Yes, it's way calmer now. Another pause. No, he doesn't ask where I am anymore. That one landed harder than I expected. I stayed still, not moving, not breathing loudly. The hallway suddenly felt like a place you don't belong, but can't leave. She continued pacing slowly. It's honestly easier. There's less pressure. Pause. Yeah, that's what I said. Structure. Then came the line that snapped everything into place. If you give him rules, he just follows them. Silence. My jaw tightened. She laughed softly again. No, I don't think he realizes. I leaned back against the wall, suddenly very aware of how quiet the apartment was. This wasn't therapy. This wasn't her trying to fix us. This was her testing control. I stepped into the living room deliberately, making enough noise so it didn't look like I'd been standing there. She turned quickly, eyes widening for half a second. Oh, hey, she said into the phone. I'll call you back. She ended the call and set the phone down. Hey, she repeated. Hey, I said calmly. She studied my face. You're home early. Traffic was light. She nodded. I was just talking to Emma. Emma, not Sarah this time. Interesting. Sounded like an important conversation, I said. Just catching up. Of course. She waited, maybe expecting a question. None came. I walked past her, grabbed a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. You seem in a good mood, I added. She shrugged. Things feel better lately. Yeah, I said quietly. They do. She smiled, relieved. That smile told me everything, because she wasn't relieved that we were closer. She was relieved that I was contained. And suddenly the entire contract looked different in my mind. Not as a desperate attempt to save the relationship, but as a tool. Something she and her friends had discussed, something designed, something meant to make me predictable. The husband's contract, not a reset, a leash with polite wording. I took a sip of water and watched her pick up her phone again. She didn't look guilty. She looked confident. And that's when the irritation finally sharpened into something clearer. Because now I understood the game. They hadn't tried to fix me. They had tried to simplify me. And the worst part? It worked. At least, until that moment. Because standing there, listening to the faint sound of her typing, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't break the rules. No, I'd follow them. Perfectly. And I'd see how comfortable she stayed when the contract stopped being a leash and started becoming evidence. After that call, something in my head shifted from irritation to calculation. Not revenge, not confrontation, just attention. When someone hands you rules, the smartest thing you can do is follow them better than they expect. So I did. I became the most cooperative husband in the history of questionable agreements. I updated her on my schedule without being asked. I didn't question her plans. I kept conversations neutral. No emotional pressure, no curiosity, no friction. And the more perfectly I followed relationship reset agreement, the more relaxed she became, which ironically made everything more obvious. She stopped explaining things entirely, not just where she was going, anything. Her day, her mood, her thoughts. The emotional sharing shrank, but she didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't mind. One evening she came home, dropped her bag, and said casually, I might be busy this weekend. Okay. She blinked. That's it? Yes. You don't want to know with what? If it's relevant, you'll tell me. She watched me carefully. You're very detached. I'm respecting boundaries. You seem calmer, she said. I am. Do you think this is working? Yes, I said. It's very efficient. She gave a small smile, but it faded quickly. Efficiency isn't exactly romantic. She kept leaning into it. More time on her phone, more late messaging, more relaxed tone when she talked about her plans. Meanwhile, I started paying attention to details. Not spying, just observing. She charged her phone face down now. She took it with her even to the bathroom. She muted notifications when she sat near me. And once, when a message popped up briefly on the screen, she turned it away faster than necessary. Small things, individually meaningless, together, directional. One night while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Somehow, She didn't take him into the bathroom with her. I didn't touch it. I didn't even lean forward. I just watched the screen light up. No name visible, just a preview line. Tomorrow, same time. The screen went dark before I could see more. I leaned back. Interesting. She came out of the bathroom a minute later, grabbed the phone immediately, and checked it. Her expression changed for a fraction of a second. Not panic, not guilt, just alertness. Then she relaxed again. "Everything okay?" she asked me. "Yeah," I said. "Just watching TV." She nodded and sat down, already typing. I didn't say anything, because by now I understood the advantage I had. She thought I was disengaged. She thought the contract had worked. She thought I'd accepted the new version of our marriage. And that gave me something more valuable than confrontation. Time. Time to watch. Time to understand. Time to let the pattern finish forming. Because the moment you accuse too early, you become emotional. But the moment you wait, you become precise. And I was starting to prefer precision. Over the next week, Claire relaxed completely. She stopped watching my reactions, stopped explaining anything, stopped even pretending the distance was temporary. The calmer I became, the more she leaned into it. She spent more time out of the apartment, more time on her phone, more time mentally somewhere else, even when she was sitting right next to me. And she looked comfortable, too comfortable, like she had already decided the new version of me was permanent. She didn't miss the old dynamic. She didn't miss the closeness. She preferred the quiet. That's when I started collecting things. Just small notes. The day she stayed out late. The evening she stepped onto the balcony to answer a call. The time she muted notifications when she sat near me. The message preview that disappeared too quickly. Dates, patterns, behavior, nothing emotional. Just observation, because once you remove emotion, everything becomes clearer. After a few days, I opened the folder again. Her rules, her structure, her control. I flipped to the last page and looked at the empty space beneath the printed text. And then I added one line. Just one. Contract termination clause. I paused, then wrote underneath it. If either party uses this agreement to create distance while pursuing another partner, the contract becomes void. Simple, neutral, final. I closed the folder and placed it back exactly where it had been. Claire walked past it later without noticing anything. She sat down next to me, relaxed, scrolling, completely unaware. And that was the moment I realized the balance had shifted. She thought the contract had contained me. But now it was waiting for her instead. I didn't bring it up right away. Instead, I kept following the contract exactly. Claire stayed relaxed. If anything, she leaned even further into the distance. She spent more time out, more time texting, less time talking to me about anything that actually mattered. A few nights later, we were sitting at the table after dinner. Quiet, neutral, exactly the kind of atmosphere the contract was supposed to create. "I think this has been good for us," she said. I nodded. "Yeah." She looked almost proud. Less tension. "Definitely." She leaned back, relaxed, confident, like she had successfully stabilized a volatile system. That's when I reached for the folder. She didn't react at first, just watched casually. "I've been following your agreement," I said. "I know," she replied, smiling slightly. "I can tell." "It's been helpful," I continued. She nodded. "Exactly." I opened the folder slowly, flipped to the last page, and turned it toward her. "I added something," I said calmly. She leaned forward, still relaxed. Then she read it. The smile disappeared. "What is this?" she asked. "Just a clarification," I said. She read the line again. Contract termination clause. Her eyes moved down to the sentence underneath. "If either party uses this agreement to create distance while pursuing another partner, the contract becomes void." She looked up at me, and for the first time since the contract appeared, she wasn't calm. "That's not part of the original agreement," she said. "No," I replied. It completes it. Her posture changed slightly. Defensive, but controlled. Why would you even add that? I shrugged. It seemed fair. She stared at me, searching for emotion. I gave her none. That implies something, she said carefully. It protects both of us, I answered. Silence. She looked back at the page, then at me. You think I'm, what? Doing something? I think agreements should cover misuse. Her jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. Is it? Yes. I nodded slowly. Then it shouldn't bother you. She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the folder slightly back toward me. You can't just modify it. I just did. That's not how this works. I leaned back. You introduced structure. I'm respecting structure. She looked at me, and now the confidence was gone. Because for the first time, the contract wasn't only regulating me, it was regulating her too. And the game suddenly didn't feel as comfortable anymore. She didn't touch the folder for a few seconds, not because she hadn't understood it, because she had. Her eyes moved from the line to my face and back again. You're overthinking this, she said finally. Maybe, I replied. This is supposed to reduce tension, not create new rules. It's not a new rule, I said calmly. It's a termination clause. She exhaled slowly. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being consistent. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed now. The calm confidence from before was gone, not replaced by anger, replaced by calculation. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I followed your structure, completely. I know. And I noticed something. Her eyes narrowed. Like what? I tapped the page lightly. You asked for less questions. You got less questions. You asked for space. You got space. You asked for structure. I followed it. Yes. And the more I followed it, the further you moved away. That's your interpretation. Maybe, I said. But the pattern is still there. She looked down at the table. You're making assumptions. I'm making observations. She didn't answer, so I leaned forward slightly. Late evenings, guarded phone, private conversations, no explanations, no interest in closing the distance, just comfort. Her voice sharpened. I'm allowed to have privacy. I slid the folder toward her. I'm just ending the agreement. She blinked. What? You wrote the rules. I followed them. They didn't bring us closer. They created distance. So the contract did exactly what you wanted. That's not true. I shook my head slightly. It removed me from the equation. She looked at me. And for the first time, there was something like uncertainty in her eyes. What does this mean? She asked. It means I'm not participating in this version anymore. You're ending it? Just like that? You already ended it, I replied. You just called it structure. I closed the folder and placed it neatly in front of her. You wanted control, I said calmly. You gave me clarity. She stared at the document. I stood up, grabbed my keys from the counter, and paused for a second. Then I added one last line, not looking at her. Signed, I said quietly, and terminated. I walked toward the door. Behind me, she finally spoke. You're overreacting. I stopped for a moment, then shook my head. No, I said. I'm just no longer managed. I opened the door and stepped out. And as the door clicked shut behind me, one thought settled cleanly in my mind. She gave me rules. I gave her consequences. I wasn't sure if she was cheating on me or not, but I was certain I didn't want to be in that kind of relationship anymore. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.